Along with WandaVision, this week Disney Plus also released a new film, Flora and Ulysses. This film stars Matilda Lawler as Flora and directed by Lena Khan. This is Leah's second directed film. Her first was The Tiger Hunter, which I'll be checking out soon just based on what I've read about it. So this film also stars Alyson Hannigan and Ben Schwartz. They are parents who are separated and contemplating divorce. Ben Schwartz's character is George Buckman. He is a failed comic book writer, while Alyson Hannigan's character, Phyllis Buckman, is a romance novelist struggling to write her next novel. Flora is a massive comic book fan who looks up to her dad and the superhero he wrote in Condesto. The film has a lot of pop culture mentions along with this. The Silver Surfer, Wolverine are mentioned in the opening credits in a very funny way. The film uses the comic book style animation with some cutscenes, and even the Iron Man line "I love you 3000" is set in the film as well, which was a little bit reaching and a little bit not needed, too much on the nose for me. But they're trying to get that comic book fan audience in to see this movie. There are even more pop culture Easter eggs in this film, like the award that Phyllis receives with Jack and Rose from Titanic on it. The award actually has a better payoff than the characters do in the film, I think, and very funny what happens to the award. Overall, this film is about hope and finding one's purpose, which is what Flora is trying to do for the squirrel Ulysses that she thinks is a superhero because he can have massive strength, which he does have in the movie, and it's kind of dips in and out of reality and like what a squirrel can do and can't do. But this is all about her, Flora, coping with their parents being separated and making a new friend in Ulysses. And this is more of like an origin story, but the arcs of the characters is where the story falls apart. The whole divorce plot point is never explained fully, making the resolution weak. You always knew what was going to happen next in the film. The villain of this film is an animal control worker played by Danny Pudi, who is determined to catch Ulysses because he thinks it is a harm to society and has rabies after an incident happens at the donut shop. Um, but there's no real motivation of why he is so evil other than the story needed a villain and needed someone to go up against Ulysses as a superhero. There's also this side story with a neighbor kid who suffers from temporary blindness due to stress. I think it was a wasted sidekick of a character and does nothing to help the story. But my biggest problem with this film was the CG animals. Ulysses is a flying squirrel who is CG'd, and there's also a cat in the movie which is also CG'd. And I didn't think the CG was bad in the film. It was just okay and took me out at a couple times, but it's just a big problem, I think, in studios today and the use of CG animals in movies. I just I remember back in the day, like movies with real animals like Air Bud, Beethoven, Ace Ventura. I love these movies. I love seeing the real animals on screen. And by using these CG animals today, we're taking away jobs from these animals and leaving them out on the street and not giving them a job to do. Having CG animals is becoming the new norm, which is hurting films in the long run, I believe. Everyone loved Airbud because the real dog was real, and you could relate to him. With CG'd animals, this connection is harder because our brains know the animals are not real. Any film could be improved by using trained animals on set. So, like for Airbud, if they remade that today, I bet you they would use a CG dog, which would not be as good as the original film because there's no connection that can be made with the dog. Um, yeah, I think any film could be improved with using trained animals on set. The reason studios are not using animals as much is because of the unpredictability of them. The animals are just improving though, trying to see a new take on their character. This is not this is like what actors do, like Jim Carrey and Will Ferrell in comedy movies. The improv lines and sometimes you get gold. A movie that comes to mind is Call of the Wild though, that really um started this trend of CG animals that and could make a lot of money on it, but it was just a massive letdown and could have been improved with the use of a real dog on set. Instead, Harrison Ford acted in front of a green screen, making his performance stale because nothing was really there. It was one of the biggest complaints of the Star Wars prequels too, is too much green screen. And now we're doing it with animals and we're seeing not a real performance from the actors in front of the real animal. We're not seeing the real fear, the real enjoyment, the real happiness that one could feel with in front of a real animal compared to a CGI'd green screen little floating ball that they're acting in front of. And because of that, overall, I think Flora and Ulysses is an okay movie, but could have been better if a real squirrel was used. There's nothing Ulysses did in the film that they couldn't have trained a real squirrel to do and been safe and treated it right. So overall, I'll give Flora and Ulysses 2 out of 5 stars.